We live in a world of information overload. Every second, new advice pops up on your feed. I'm sure right now, if you go to IG or your favorite platform, you'll see a lot of things promising to change your life. Think of all the information you have access to right now in your palms. You have access to information to change your life, to switch careers, to travel, and to even pursue your wildest dreams. On the flip side, you have a wild desert of distraction that can simply disorient you and keep you away from achieving all these goals you set out for yourself. In this age and time where there's infinite flow of information out there, where advice, strategies, and opinions are at your fingertips, why do so many of us still struggle to take action? Why aren't we moving closer to our goals when we should? Why do we feel stuck endlessly consuming knowledge and information on the internet when we are just simply failing to implement it? Now, the answer is simple: information overload. When you absorb too much information without a right system to process and act on that information, you enter into a state of analysis paralysis. Now, this sounds like a big word. I mean, to me, it sounds like a big word, but it's simply the feeling of being stuck in a loop where you keep thinking because you have the information, you are processing it, you are chewing it, you are masticating it, but you're not really moving forward into what you want to do. In this piece, I'm going to explore how information can actually hinder you from taking action and how you can break free from this block. Now, let's start with what I call the paradox of too much information. Have you ever spent hours reading books, watching tutorials, or even binge watching experts talk about what they love, only to realize that you haven't actually done much? You may have consumed information, you may have new exposure, right, in terms of information, but that only makes you feel productive. But your brain gets a little bit dopamine each time you consume this information. And this tricks you into believing you're actually making progress. But in reality, you're just consuming information. But that chemical reaction in your brain just makes you think you are doing something. And this is passively doing. It's like you are standing at the starting line of a race. You are stretching, you are hydrating, you are visualizing the finish line, you are doing everything, but never actually taking the step forward. The problem is the more knowledge you collect, the more it feels like you're actually preparing instead of doing. And that's a reality because the preparation without action is just glorified procrastination. You can think about it. How many courses have you taken? I know I have taken a lot. I mean, this year I've reduced the number of courses I take. But how many books have you read? How many have you applied? For me, I've read about 6 books this year. How many times have you said that we need to learn one more thing just before you start? I know I do this a lot, but at some point, you have to admit that knowing more isn't going to get you to do more. You simply have to get into action. Conflicting advice creates doubt. Let's talk about the internet. The biggest double-edged sword of our time. It's good, it's helpful, but is it helping you in particular? What have you achieved using the internet? On one hand, you have access to everything. You have access to all the information you can ever ask for. And that's the problem. One aspect tells you should wake up at 5 a.m. I know I've seen those videos a lot. Success is built in the early hours. You need to wake up, activate monk mode. But another one will come and say, Charlie, waking up at 5 a.m. is nonsense. You need to wake up at this time. Some expect to say you should niche down. Others will say you should diversify. Some will say cold outreach is the best way to reach clients. Others will say, nah, cold outreach is dead. But who is right? The interesting thing is that none of them is right. None of them is right and none of them is wrong. The more you read, the more you explore, the more you start doubting yourself because of that gap between the information you have and the action. Every piece of advice is going to contradict because you haven't gone into action. Here's what I've realized over the years. No strategy works unless you stick with it. Most people will tell you what to do, how to do it, and all that. But most times, even when they tell you you need to stick with it for a long time, you simply lack the perspective in reality to be able to appreciate the advice. Most people don't fail because they've picked the wrong method. They fail because they hop on from one approach to the other, never sticking to just one long enough to see the results. If you look at people who are the greats in what they've been doing, it's something they've been doing for decades, right? You don't expect to use 1 year. So instead of drowning in endless advice, trying to pick all their strategies and all that, why don't you give it some time and simply commit to the work? Here's where it gets even worse. The more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. It's an irony. The realization is that paralyzes you because if you get to realize that you actually need more to be able to do good work, then you would actually likely not even start because now you are not just some beginner fumbling your way through. You are aware of all the nuances because you've been learning from people, right? And that could actually mess up your growth process. Before, ignorance was bliss, but now it's not. You didn't know what you could do to be wrong, but now Now you have all the mental checklists, you have all the information, you feel behind, and that alone is a heavy toll on you. You keep convincing yourself that you need one more course, you need one more tutorial, you need one more mentor to start, because at that point your standards have risen. But let me ask you this question. Did Picasso, the great painter of all time, in my opinion, wait until he mastered every brush, every technique that he really needed before he started painting? Even Jeff Bezos, did he have the perfect plan? He just did some research about how the internet was growing and e-commerce was booming, and he went into it. He didn't wait to have everything perfect. Now, perfection is a myth, something I came to a realization painfully. And waiting until you feel really ready is just an excuse, if you ask me. The truth is that you won't actually feel ready until you start. Once you get into motion, everything will start to fall into place. Let's talk about cognitive overload. Your brain can only handle so much before it crashes. We like to think we are these superhumans capable of absorbing unlimited knowledge and applying it instantly. But in reality, the brain has its own limits. When you flood it with too much information all at once, it's likely to shut down, like an overloaded computer freezing up. I mean, I use a Windows machine, so you can't blame me. Instead of making progress, you likely feel scattered. Instead of clarity, you feel some mental fog, and that alone is going to cloud your judgment. The worst of all is that when everything feels equally important, nothing really gets done. The solution is to simplify everything, to reduce the mental effort involved in moving from an idea, a thought, to actually putting something out there. Even if it means just testing it out. If you are constantly taking in information but never acting on it, you need to stop, you need to pause, and you need to take some reflection. Take one idea, just one, and put it into action before allowing yourself to consume more. Once you put yourself in this motion, this state of motion, it allows you to explore even more relevant information, because at the end of the day, action is what leads into mastery. No more thinking, no more reading. The real question is, are you ready to start? Because that's what people are usually nervous about, not really about the information. Starting without much information is okay, but most people are nervous to get started. And the more sometimes you pile information, the more you even get more nervous to start. So it's just like this cycle of endless information overload that creates even more expectations, that just paralyzes you to the core, that you feel like, okay, at some point you may even feel like just giving up, right? Sometimes it happens. You get a good idea, and the more you research, the more you realize that this thing is not really for you. Now, that could be good. That's if it's really not for you. But most times, because you've consumed too much information, you feel there's a lot to be done and all that, the weight of it alone weighs you down. I watched an interview of the CEO of NVIDIA, and he said if he knew it was going to be this difficult, he wouldn't have tried it. Recently, Dangote was interviewed about his plant, and he said the same thing. If he knew it was going to be this difficult, he probably wouldn't have started. So here's how to break free from all this analysis paralysis. Enough of that stuff. Let's talk about what you can do. First of all, you want to apply the 80-20 rule. You need to prioritize actionable knowledge. Not every piece of information out there is gold. I learned the hard way that 80% of your results come from just 20% of what you actually absorb. These are not random numbers. There's a book actually on this. You can go out there, find it, and read. So instead of trying to swallow everything, every book, every tutorial, try to get to know all the secrets of all the aspects out there, I realized it was far more effective to actually focus on one core principle or a few key information at a time that truly matters, and then put them into action. When I was thinking about starting something, for example, I spent a couple of weeks watching videos of how to start, and that really got me overwhelmed, and I was really stuck. Finally, when I just decided to forget about it, get into action, I bought a domain and I put it into action. I was able to share it out with people immediately to see what they thought about my idea. Now, what you also want to do is to limit the information you take. We live in a time when there's an almost endless stream of content out there, so it's easy to get sucked in. When I used to think that consuming more meant that I was preparing for success, but I eventually learned that too much input without output only leads to mental clutter. Because all the information you are consuming, where is it going? What are you using it for? I started setting clear boundaries for myself, limiting the number of content or tutorials or courses I took before I was able to move into action. I started looking at input and output and not just input. For every hour I spent, for instance, I would try to do something. So this simple shift not only reduced the overwhelm on me, but it also helped me to transform not just how I consume information, but to be able to actually get things done. There's a temptation to stockpile knowledge, to read every book, to watch every webinar, and to never stop accumulating facts, especially as someone like me who just likes to learn at times. But this only made my mind heavier and actually less focused. Instead, I began to practice just-in-time learning. This means I only go into things or topics when I immediately find them relevant to what I'm working on. I'm working on something right now and I need information, I go out there. For instance, when I was launching a website, I didn't spend months trying to master coding and like know all that 10x coders can like do. I didn't try to do that. I just learned what was the basics, right, to get started with that. And it reduces overload. It also helps me to like move with a clear purpose at each point in time. Instead of just learning and learning and learning, at least I learn, I do. It helps me in that way. So act before you feel ready. If you've ever found yourself waiting for that perfect moment when everything is lined up and you're 100% ready to start a new project, you are never going to get there. I've never felt a moment that was like 100% perfect, right? So perfectionism is a trap. I used to hesitate for ages whether it was about starting something that I just came up with because I felt I needed a perfect setup. I needed everything to be aligned in the right way. But the truth is, confidence is built through actually doing. I learned that the best way to build momentum to get things done was to just start, even when it was imperfect. Create a decision-making framework. When I was bombarded with conflicting advice, like wake up at 5 a.m. or waking up with your natural rhythm, or even niche down versus to diversify your skills, become a journalist, I often felt paralyzed because these are like extremes, not knowing which one to really choose. That's when I realized that I need to make up my own decision-making framework. I started asking myself simple yet powerful questions like, does this align with my values, my long-term goals? Have I really tested this to be able to make a decision, or I'm just going to depend on someone to decide? Will it still matter? Because some of these things don't really matter in the long term. By setting a time limit such as like 24 hours to make some decisions, the framework has been able to help me to cut through the clutter in my head and to be able to force myself to make a decision to act. Now let's be real for a moment. We've all been there, spending hours, even days, sometimes even months, if you are trying to learn complex skills like software development, programming, scrolling through courses, watching videos, endless consumption. And while that might make you feel like you're actually constantly learning, it's not actually getting you anywhere. It's like watching a single movie over again. It's fascinating, but you never really learn anything new. If you want to make something great, then you want to really start doing something now, even as you are learning. I was the ultimate consumer. I do a lot of binge reading, watching tutorials, courses that I even bought, and even newsletters. Everywhere was optimized to be learning. But the more I consumed, the more I realized that I was really stuck in the same place. I was trapped in a cycle of endless preparation, and I was actually doing zero action, right? So I made a conscious decision to flip the switch from being a passive learner to someone who was actively creating or using the information for something. And that shift has completely transformed my life. Today, I want to share the core ideas that help me change that. And I believe that they can help you as well. The first one is shift from passive learning to active doing. What do I mean by this? Instead of reading yet another book on productivity, watching another video, how to get motivated, you can actually decide to test a new routine for just 1 week, not a month, not a year, just 1 week. Because the commitment is small, it's a trivial decision. So just putting that commitment is easier than deciding something you're going to do for 1 year. Reading about strategies was one thing, but actually implementing them, even a small change in my daily routine, made a world of difference. It was like stepping out of a dark tunnel into a ray of light where the results were actually more realistic and they were immediate in some cases. I could actually learn from what was happening in the real time. And that's the beauty of action. It gives you feedback, it builds momentum, and most importantly, it can help you to move from idea into reality much faster than just trying to learn everything, to understand the whole process before you get into action. The second thing is to measure progress by action, not knowledge, because knowledge is not power. Knowledge acted upon is power. Now, here's another truth I've learned the hard way. For the longest time, I measured success by how much I was actually reading. Like, okay, let me read 5 books a month and how many courses I was taking. All of these things that were just like vanity metrics. But what's the point of accumulating all of this information if I actually never applied it? About you, if you never apply it. Success or getting things done isn't about quantity, it's about the quality. Instead, shift your focus to doing something consistently. If you are a writer, stick to writing consistently. Whatever you do out there, stick to doing it consistently. Through these actions, you'll be able to get enough feedback, enough confidence to continue that journey. Even if you started as an absolute beginner, just a few months of commitment to something can really give you a lot of progress that can change your life. Now, the third Third, develop a bias for action. Now let's talk about one of the most critical mindsets that you can have out there, having a bias for action. I can't stress this enough because waiting until you feel completely ready is a surefire way to never get started. That's real. Every time you hesitate, every time you think you need to know more, that's a missed opportunity for you. And this is learned the hard way. Some of these things I learned that the best way to build confidence is to act first and then refine later. Start small if you have to. If you can start big, it's not bad, but that's a bigger setup, which means you are going to be more nervous. But by launching things, getting into action over time, these small wins will build enough momentum that will eventually lead to bigger successes. Now, most people, because of how big things are dramatized and glamorized online, we want to usually start big. The key is to understand that every single action, no matter how small, compounds over time. So here's my challenge to you. Instead of endlessly consuming information, I hope you are able to get out of yours soon. Take that first imperfect step now, today, because every moment you wait is an opportunity lost. Remember, your future isn't built on knowledge alone. It's built on the actions you take, the things you do. Let's stop being consumers and start being creators, doers.